Hello everyone, and welcome to the if, elif, and else statements lecture. So this is going to be our first lecture in the statements portion of this course. So we're going to go ahead and hop over to a quick presentation to kind of just explain the basics of an if statement. Here I have opened the Jupyter notebook, and we're just going to be going over this quick introduction. Alright, let's go ahead and hop over. Okay, so if, elif, else statements. So if statements in Python allow us to tell computers to perform alternative actions based on the certain set of results. So verbally we can imagine as if we're telling the computer, hey, if this case happens, perform this particular action. So we can then expand on this idea a little further with elif and else statements, which elif kind of, you can think of it as else if. So it's basically telling the computer, hey, if this case happens, perform some action. If another case happens, then perform some other action. Else, if none of the above cases happen, perform this action, etc., etc. So let's go ahead and hop over to the Jupyter notebooks so we can get a look at the syntax format. So here in the Jupyter notebook, we can see that the syntax for if, elif, else statements looks a little something like this. So you have if space case, so some sort of Boolean check, see if something's true or greater than or equals to, etc. Then perform a particular action, so a certain piece of code. Then elif will be another if case to perform some other action. Or else, if neither of these cases occurred, and you can have more than just two elif statements, you can have as many as you want, then finally perform that third action. So we're going to go and walk through some quick examples, and in this case we're just going to be using straight booleans as the check statements. So let's go ahead and start with a very simple example. So I'm going to say if space true colon, and if I click enter, notice how there's an automatic indent done for me, which I can just do with tab. So start thinking about that white space. We'll cover it more when it comes to for loops and things like that, but this white space is actually necessary for Python to understand what you're typing. So I'm going to say if true, print it was true. So it was true, so that makes sense. So what if I say if false, print it was true? Nothing happened because it's false. It doesn't let you do anything, since that's only going to happen when the case is true. So now to take this example a little further, I'm going to add some else logic in. So let's go ahead and say x is equal to false. I'm going to say if x, because remember we're doing some sort of Boolean check here, I'm going to say print x was true. Else, so in any other case where x isn't true, I'm going to say print, let's see, I will print when x is anything not true. Okay. So right now we have this print statement going. I will print when x is anything not true. So since x is false, we had the else print. So let's go ahead and change this to true and see what happens. And you notice x was true as printed out here. Okay, so let's go ahead and break down what's going on right now. And I'll go over a little bit more in formatting and syntax. So I set x equal to true, and I said if space x, so some sort of Boolean check has to occur on this line, colon, and notice how when I start my next line I indent. So that lets you know that whatever is going on here occurs with that if. So back, if we hop over back to the syntax here, notice that we have our statement, some colon, an indent, and that tells Python perform anything that's indented here underneath that if statement. And then elif goes back and lines up with that if, and else also lines up with that if. And then the indented actions perform only when the case above it takes place. Okay. So then we have an else, and then it says print, and depending on what x is, if it's true or false, we'll get a certain print statement out. All right, so to get a fuller picture of how far if, elif, and else can take us, we're going to write out a nested structure. So take careful note of how if, elif, and else line up in the code. And just a quick note, I say elif. Some people will say elif, so feel free to say it however you want. So now we're going to introduce a little bit of comparison syntax for Python. So I'm going to go ahead and say LOC is equal to bank. So I'm saying LOC, that variable, is equal to banks, and that's going to stand for location in my code. So I'm going to say if loc, which is for location, is equal to, and notice how I'm putting double equal signs. So we went over some comparison methods earlier, and the double equal sign is just to check if loc is equal to something. If you use a single equal sign, that means you're trying to reassign something, which won't work in this case. So I'm going to say if loc is equal to autoshop, print welcome to the auto shop. And then I'm going to say elif loc is equal to, let's say, the bank, colon indent, prints welcome to the bank. And in any other case, which will be my else statement, note how I don't have any booleans there because I'm saying in any other case that wasn't predefined, I want to just print a question, where are you? And in this case, when I ran that cell, it said welcome to the bank. So that makes sense because my location was bank. So if I set this equal to auto shop, it says welcome to the auto shop. If I set this to something else such as mall, since neither of these if statements get activated as true, the else occurs and asks me where are you. So it's important to note how the nested if statements are each checked until a true boolean causes the nested code beneath it to run. And you should also note that you can put as many of these elif statements as we wanted. So we could have also put in an elif loc double equal sign to mall, and it said print welcome to the mall. Okay, and if we ran that, then we say welcome to the mall, since right here this occurred as a true boolean. So let's just create two more simple examples of the if, elif, and else statements. So I'm going to say this person, so a variable called person, is equal to Sam. And I'm going to say if person double equal sign Sam, let's say print hi Sam. Whoops. And then else print, let's say what's your name. Now notice what happened here. I have to use double quotations since I'm using a single quotation with the what's in order for that string to work properly. Alright, so if you notice here I have person equals Sam. If person is equal to Sam, hi Sam, what's your name? Since person was equal to Sam, then this boolean check right here, person equal to Sam, and I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste that. So person equals Sam, that's going to return true since that variable is equal to the string Sam. And since this happened to be true, then the nested code beneath it will run. So just a quick note on indentation. It's important to keep a good understanding of how indentation works in Python, and it really maintains the structure and order of your code. We're going to touch in on this topic again as we go through all the different statement types in Python, and we're really going to hone in on it when we start talking about building your own functions and methods. So right now, just keep in mind that I'm indenting here whenever you see a colon. So that says, based on what happens up here, indent space, right here, this code's going to run. All right, so just a quick overview of what we went over here. Quick and a brief overview of if, elif, and else statements. So those if statements in Python allow us to tell the computer to perform alternative actions based on a certain set of results. This is what the syntax looks like. You have if, bunch of cases that check for booleans. Once one of those is true, then you perform one of the actions. Then you can have an else statement that says if none of those happen to be true, then perform some final action. Okay, there's a couple more examples here in the Jupyter Notebook you can check out, but other than that, we'll go ahead and move on to the next lecture.